Hello, Lynn.
Hello.
Hello, everyone who is joining us. Welcome to the ROI Frontline Connection. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes while we wait for a bunch of people to join. While everyone is coming on board, why don't you say a quick word in the chat to everybody? Just let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to see where everybody's calling in from today. A few more people that are coming in. Some names I recognize on the list. From Boston, same here. Allison, thanks for joining. I'm in Rhode Island. And Lynn, where are you dialing in from today?
I am here from Fort Collins, Colorado.
Lovely, lovely. Enjoying some nice fall weather here.
It's beautiful.
Hello from New Jersey. Lovely. Well, while we're waiting for a few of the other folks to join, thank you for Utrecht. While we're waiting for some other folks to join, let's just cover off a little bit of housekeeping. You're already on the chat. You're introducing yourself to everybody. We are going to be running a couple of polls throughout today's session. For those of you who are joining us live and thought we were going to let you off the hook, that is not going to be the case. You do have to participate. Only a couple. We're not going to make it too hard on you, but we want to get some real live feedback from you. For those of you who want to take some notes today, please feel free to do so, but we're also going to be sharing all of the slides after the session for everybody. And we have some content and everything we can share after the fact as well. Also, we're going to be doing some Q&A at the end of today's webinar. So if you have burning questions, feel free to throw them into the chat, or you can write them down and hang on to them. We'll try to get to everybody as much as we possibly can at the end. But I think people are still coming in. If you're just joining us now from Minneapolis, thank you, Chris. Say hello, welcome. Tell us where you're calling in from. But Lynn, what do you say we kick this thing off?
Let's get going.
All right. Well, let's start with some introductions. We'll start with you, Lynn Zimmerman, the indomitable, the inestimable, the indefatigable.
I don't know about that one. But hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Zimmerman. I am the CEO of Swing Communication, and I'm located in Fort Collins, Colorado. And the focus of my business is internal and change communication. So I work with companies to help them communicate change and big things that are happening within their companies. And frontline communication is a big part of that.
Wonderful. Well, we're very glad to have you and your insights. And everybody, my name is Daren Jennings. I'm the CCO here at Speap. So I look after our commercial organization. I've been with the organization for about 4 years. So I help people understand who Speap is. I help them have a wonderful experience when they're implementing Speap and make sure that they get really solid business results after the fact. Got about 12 years of experience in the internal communication sector. So very excited to be here today. But let's go ahead and kick off this presentation. I'm going to make the slide a little bit bigger for everybody to see. Now, before we jump into it, we are running a little raffle of sorts today. So for those of you who are joining us live, or even if you're watching after the fact, take a selfie with your screen or just a screenshot of your screen. Tag me, tag Lynn, tag Speap. We'll even give you credit for 1 out of 3. Share a lesson, something that you learned, some kind of an insight, and tag us. And we're going to pick one very special winner to win a prize. Probably not as good as a car, but I would say the emotional response would be just as good as that. What do you think, Lynn?
I think so, yeah.
Lovely. So please do share that information. Now, we're going to start off with a quick question just to get a sense of the audience today. So we're going to run a quick poll in a minute because we want to get your sense here. But the idea here is that we want to provide something of value no matter where you are in your employee experience journey. So in a minute, respond to the poll. The first question is, if you're just getting started, you're here to learn, or whether you're a little bit further along, but you're looking for some tactics and tips that you can start when you get back to work. Or for those of you who responded to the title of today's session about ROI Frontline Comms, do you need help convincing your stakeholders to prioritize internal communications and employee experience? Or are you in that group of folks that have just had enough and you're actively seeking new solutions? So please take a moment to respond to the poll. I'll be able to see those pretty quickly as they come in. All right, some of the votes are coming in. We got a handful here. All right, nice mix. So some folks are actively seeking new solutions. A lot of people are just looking for tips and tricks. Definitely some people that are need help convincing. and some folks are just getting started. Well, that's great. Well, Lynn, I think we've got a good session for all these audience types today, and you might even fit in one or more of these buckets. Who knows? So how about our agenda? Why don't you kick it off for us today, Lynn?
All right, so we have a few goals for today's conversation, and so we want to enable you to challenge outdated assumptions about frontline communication. I know we've probably all heard from leaders who have been and people who have been in the business a long time about some things that probably aren't true about frontline, but it's ingrained in the culture. We want to help you make a business case for investing in your frontline. We want to help you apply a simple framework to measure your impact, and then, of course, inspire you with content tips to really connect with your frontline. And so, when you leave here, we want you to feel like you can secure budget, drive engagement, and then prove the value of the work you're doing with the frontline.
Love that. And I was so excited when we ran a version of this presentation back at the IABC World Conference in Vancouver over the summer. We made some additions to it, but no matter where you are on that journey, we've got tactics, really tactical ideas for it, or also some more high-level things when it comes to the finance. So this is going to be a great session for everybody today. Thank you. So let's start off with we're going to start with some of those myth-busting misconceptions. We're going to bring the real hard-hitting business case for Frontline Connection and introducing that core framework, really all about measuring the effectiveness of it. Lynn's going to take us through the pulse audit, some things that you can do today, and some real tactical, real-world insights that you can do, as well as a call to action at the end. So let's jump right into it. But I guess before we do, let me introduce a little bit about Speap. Speap, of course, is sponsoring this session today. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Speap really is focused on the frontline employee experience. So those of you who are new to this call or watching the recording, you might be asking yourselves, who are you and what gives you the right to talk to us about these types of things? Obviously, Lynn has her consulting business and been doing this for a very, very long time. Speap also has its roots in Frontline Comms. Our two founders created the company. They were grocery store managers and experienced firsthand just how difficult it was to communicate with and engage their staff. That was almost 15 years ago. And of course, Speap has gone through quite a few changes and evolutions since that time. But we're proud to say that we have over 1 million users who are engaging with their organizations in Speap today, over 600 customers. And so the insights and the ideas that we're bringing today is based on that experience. And of course, Lynn, you're going to be offering a significant amount of insight from your own experience as well.
Yes.
Okay, now we can start with the first myth. So I know we're going to be preaching to the choir a little bit here, but who here on the call thinks that frontline workers are expendable and easy to replace? Right? I know it's a rhetorical question. You don't have to actually respond if you don't want to. Obviously, that is not true, but the reality is we're certainly acting like it. But the reality is that our frontline teams, they're really critical to business operations. Their absences are deeply felt. And when they leave, they significantly hurt our profitability, our operational excellence, and of course, our customer satisfaction. So I want to share some insights here when it comes to actually what the impact of a high turnover rate is and how internal communications can actually impact them. So if you're thinking about, let's just focus on two of the industries that we serve primarily here at Speap, one of them being manufacturing. Now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, manufacturing has about a 20% attrition rate every single year. So if you're running a manufacturing plant that needs 1,000 people to operate it functionally, you have to hire 200 people every year. But the cost to replace one skilled manufacturing worker can range anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000. And that is a significant impact. So, of course, we have to ask the question, well, how does internal communications, how does employee engagement actually move the needle to prevent these types of things? Well, the biggest drivers of the attrition, as you can see, are, no surprise, lack of career development, the feeling of being undervalued, that sounds familiar, and of course, pay competition. Now, internal communications, employee experience, you're probably not going to have a direct impact on pay competition, but if you can mitigate some of the risks around lack of career development by exposing folks to things that are available to them, as well as just hearing them out by impacting some of those ways that they feel undervalued, that can have a significant change on the organization's bottom line. Now, hospitality, a different one, as you can see, much, much higher turnover than you see typically in manufacturing. In fact, even for a lot of hospitality roles, think about hospitality, housekeeping, food and beverage in hotels. They often have more than 100% turnover. Now, the cost to replace these folks tends to be a little bit less expensive. But again, big drivers of the attrition are something that internal communications can directly impact. So pay, maybe a little bit trickier, but unpredictable scheduling, well, we could probably help with that. And lack of career growth, definitely can help with that. Lack of recognition, absolutely, we can help with that. And Shay, I love your comment. Yes, they're the ones out there getting the real work done. Love that. So we know that myth is crazy. Lynn, what about this one? What do you think?
All right. So the next myth is frontline workers are not invested or ambitious in their career. And I think we all know that is so far from the truth, but there's a lot of misperceptions about that within the organization. And, your frontline, they care about career growth. They care about being recognized for the work that they're doing, and they are deeply invested in company performance. I've worked with some frontline teams that are so knowledgeable about their business because it impacts, will they be going to work tomorrow? Because if the market is not, if they don't need the product, they might shut down a mill. So you'd be surprised how knowledgeable some of the frontline workers are about the business because it directly impacts their ability to bring home a paycheck. And so lack of career development is in the top 3 reasons frontline workers quit. And in construction and manufacturing, that is the #1 reason. And research shows that 64% of frontline workers would stay an additional 6 years if they had opportunities for advancement. And a lot of times they don't know about the career development and learning opportunities that are available to them. And so some of those 64%, they might have those opportunities available, but if they don't know about them, their chances of leaving for another company that is more open about that and provides them with more information about it, it's higher. So often, how do you reach your frontline workers? How do you share that information with them is so critical to think about.
I think it's absolutely true. And when we think about those key drivers of attrition that we talked about, pay being one of them, well, someone who's willing to leave a job in, say, manufacturing or construction for an extra $1 or $2 an hour, that might have an immediate impact. But if they realize that they have a career path to actually grow their pay significantly beyond that and have more fulfillment out of their career, then they're probably a little bit less likely to take that extra $1 or $2 raise. You never know.
All right, this one, since our audience is internal comms folks, don't get mad. Internal comms is just corporate fluff. It doesn't impact the bottom line. And also, we know this is not true. Internal comms directly impacts financial performance, customer satisfaction, and productivity. It just can be hard sometimes to show that. And so, and to tie that back to the frontline, just 24% of frontline workers are confident in their job skills and say that they know what's going on. And also, a lot of frontline workers don't see the leaders, the senior leaders of your company, the CEO, the leadership team as the actual leaders of the company. There's some recent research that shows most frontline workers see their supervisor or the person who is in charge of the facility that they work from. That's who they see as their leader. And so understanding your frontline, knowing who they look to for information and how they grow their career, that's this really important thing for internal comms to understand. And then companies with effective internal comms programs enjoy higher results. So 4.5 times higher retention rates, 30% higher engagement rates, 12 times higher job satisfaction, and 25% higher productivity. As internal communicators, we have an impact on all of those things. And so how do we show that? What are ways we can measure that and help senior leaders understand the impact that we do have on that business?
Well, that's what today is all about. We're going to get to some of those things later as well, aren't we? All right. So another myth, we've only got a couple more of these here, folks, but this is one that we hear a lot, certainly in my role in Speap, which is you have to convince your employees, your frontline employees, to use their phones for work, because the way Speap works is typically it's on a mobile app on their personal device. But the reality is that people are already on their phones. This is the way the vast majority of frontline teams access the internet, let alone their company tools, on their mobile device. So they have their phones, they're ready and willing to connect. That's, I think, the important bit is willing. So the folks over at Engagedly ran a survey pretty recently, which was staggering even to me, that 86% of frontline workers are open to using communication tools for work, even on their personal phones. Now, this is actually a tricky part because for frontline teams, only 21% of them have access to the company intranet, which is another common channel for desk-based employees to access internal comms. And only 17% have company email addresses because obviously it's so expensive. So I think we're going to run another quick poll here just for the audience. which is, do your frontline teams have company email? It's a question we get all the time. And while people are responding to this poll, I think this is something that is very interesting because we hear not only there's concern about other folks themselves going to be open to putting this on their personal device, but are we going to run into some client compliance issues and so forth? We recognize that is a challenge a lot of organizations face. Now, Speap itself has some interesting ways of mitigating some of the risk around that through notification settings and various other activity control to help minimize that. But it's a really important point. Let's see where the results are coming in.
Kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah, about right. So about a 60-40 split. So yeah.
And I'm wondering on this, if they have a company email, how often do they actually access it?
That's such a good point. I was speaking to a customer of ours recently who does provide company emails for their frontline teams. It's a construction organization, and the number of that you can go and see in the data that, oh, they haven't accessed it for 6 months, a year, 3 months. They have no idea even how to get into it because they sign up when they get started and they forget about it.
Right.
Oh my God. All right, well, let's keep going on. So I'm going to maintain this, which is improving this is just too expensive, right? We hear this all the time. We don't have the budget for it. This is just too much money. The reality is that your cost of disengagement, turnover, as we've discussed, and compliance violations are significantly higher. So I want to share a quick story. This is an actual real case study from a Speap customer. It's a major hospitality entertainment company with tens of thousands of employees. Now, they approached this in a very interesting way where they said, look, we're not just going to invest in employee experience or communications for its own sake. We want to invest in this because we're going to drive significant business outcomes. That's where your ROI comes in. So they focused on those 3 key metrics. One, they wanted to reduce turnover. They also wanted to be more efficient and reduce the time that they spent in meetings. And they also wanted to shorten that training and onboarding time for very specific roles. And they measured those after a year, after having fully implemented Speap. And after that first year, they saved 157 jobs completely. That saved them almost $400,000 in recruiting and training costs alone. The time spent in meetings per day reduced by 15 minutes. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it from an ROI standpoint, but keep in mind, this is a hospitality entertainment company. Every minute they are spending in a meeting is a minute they're not spending supporting and engaging their guests and delighting their guests. So they're able to take that and recapture that to provide some better savings and a better experience for their own guests. Another one was they were able to reduce their training and onboarding time from 2 full shifts to 1.5 shifts. And that's a really important part. And they were able to do that by digitizing some of those formerly paper-based or in-person type processes and allow people to engage that content asynchronously. And they actually got them to up to fully proficient levels within just 1.5 shifts. This resulted in 600,000 savings by their own estimate, which was significantly more than their investment into Speap. So it's such a great success story. Now, that is our research, and I want you to know that you don't have to take our word for it. This is also supported by some external research. So if you consider what ROI actually means, which is for every dollar I invest in this particular program, what do I get out of it? Now, if you take a hypothetical organization, and this is data, by the way, that has been provided by Deutsche Bank, Gartner, McKinsey, for an average 1,000 person organization, you can assume you're going to invest around $25,000 a year in a tool like a Speap or something similar. But what they found was that the benefit of this in turnover alone, now they had a bit of a higher cost of recruitment, but on average, if they can just reduce their churn rate by 10 or 20%, again, that's a percentage of a percent, so don't be intimidated by that number. The benefit can range anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million a year. So what Deutsche Bank is saying is that for most organizations, all things being equal, they get $50 back for every dollar they invest in this. And the cost of something like Speap is actually paid back in about a week. So pretty staggering ROI on this type of thing. All right, I think we busted a few myths here, Lynn. What do you say? Should we move on?
Yeah, I think so, because we want everybody to leave here today with some action items and some things that you can start doing. And so we're going to help you make the business case for Frontline Connection.
Love that.
So we'll start out with a quote. I love a good quote. And so Richard Branson, who we were just before we started here talking about how nice his teeth are, being a good listener is absolutely critical to being a good leader. You have to listen to the people who are on the front line. I think that's such a powerful quote. Use that when you're talking to your leaders to remind them that frontline communication is a critical part of your business.
So true. And it's evidenced by those number one causes of attrition, isn't it? Not being heard, not being valued.
And so, are your frontline workers disengaged or are they disconnected? And I think that's a really important distinction to make, because 61% of frontline employees say they feel ignored or unheard by leadership. These are the people who are doing the work that makes your business run. And so, obviously pulling them off the line, taking them away from the work that they are doing does affect the business, but also they want to be heard. I've worked with some companies where we've done focus groups with frontline workers, and they come to those focus groups with a list of things that they want to talk about. Might not have anything to do with the work we're trying to with the focus group, but they don't get these opportunities very often. And so stop making assumptions about frontline workers. I worked with one client that they just believed that their frontline workers didn't want to use
Direct deposit.
They wanted to continue getting their paper paychecks, and they didn't want to do automatic deposit, and they fought against it. They didn't want to do it, and finally, once they did it, they had so much feedback that the employees were excited that they didn't have to go to the bank every week, and they didn't have to take time away from their families to deposit their checks. And so there's a lot of assumptions about what the frontline wants, but we need to ask them. We can't just assume. And so, go ahead, Daren.
I'm sorry to interject, but I think it's such a good point about the disconnection, because this ties into your point earlier about listening, right? So if you don't have a path by which you can connect with people or to hear that feedback at scale, you're going to miss some significant opportunities.
Yeah, it's so important to listen and just not assume one thing or another. And so increased strategic communication equals increased engagement, and that's pretty clear. But it also improves your safety record. It improves productivity, compliance, and retention. Things like when you go back to safety, things like on a project site, if you're in construction, there's different parts of a building. If you're building a skyscraper, at some point there's going to be people up in the air. And so, your communication around that part of the construction build is to say, when you're climbing up to one of the higher levels, make sure your hammer is attached to you so you don't drop it on somebody's head. And so, thinking about how can we help the business do their jobs better and safer, and make sure that we're consistently messaging those folks to remind them, here's what's important this week to really think about from a safety standpoint. And then investing in frontline communication is an investment in the future of your organization. We have tools. There's the ability to reach people in ways that we haven't had the ability to reach, 20 years ago. And so there is an opportunity to grow your business through improved communication.
100%. Yeah, which brings us to another really good case study to illustrate the point about the value of having a platform that meets your frontline where they are, but also soliciting that feedback, because we want to dispel that myth. They're not ambitious. They're not invested. But this is a great one. So there's an interesting backstory about this particular manufacturing client, but they were in a hyper competitive environment with a lot of local other manufacturers within their town. Their employment rate their unemployment rate was in the, it's like 0.3% or something. It was a highly employable area and a lot of competition. And that they found that they were losing workers to go work at the plant down the road in the same town. And so they had to address this problem and say, well, we're facing this competition. Some of the other folks are offering some more flexible schedules. Again, thinking about that number one reason for people leaving their jobs. And they asked a simple question. Hey, if we were to move to a 4-day work week instead of a 5-day work week, what do you think that's a good idea? And of course, like your story with the direct deposit, Lynn, this was immediately met by skepticism by leaders and saying, there's no way anybody wants to do this. So the comms team said, well, let's ask the audience. We'll run a poll. So what happened? Well, they ran the poll and the results were overwhelming. As you can see, 80% of people favor the 4-day, 10-hour work week as opposed to 5-day because they have other obligations outside of work. I'd like to have a 3-day weekend every weekend if I could. But as a result, they were significantly more competitive compared to the other manufacturing facilities within the area. Their turnover rates dropped more than 25%, instant ROI. Their recruitment targets were met because, well, that number was lower, first of all, and the engagement rates really soared. So I love this example because it's such a great success story of something so simple, but now you have the data to back it up, and look at the downstream effects.
And in those cases, you increase engagement because you're asking people what they want.
Right. Yeah. Some of those softer side things. So there's multiple benefits here. So, all right. So let's move on a little bit to how we can measure some of the internal communications effectiveness. We've had some great examples here. Now, we've introduced this concept here at Speak App. It's essentially the core framework for measuring the effectiveness of it. So the core is an acronym. The first one is the cost per engaged employee, your ongoing engagement trends, the retention of messages, and your engagement follow-up effectiveness. That one's a bit of a mouthful. Now, I'm going to go through this at a very high level here, but if anybody wants to learn more detail about the core framework and some specific examples, scan that QR code, or you can also just send us a message in the chat and we'll make sure you get a copy of it. So let's talk a little bit more detail about the cost per engaged employee. This is something that is a metric that I think a lot of folks aren't as familiar with, but the idea is that, of course, you're going to have to invest something in your communications, whether it's a platform, whether it's you're printing out materials to post on bulletin boards, whether you have digital signage solutions. The idea is if you can take the total cost of all of your communication solutions and divide that by the total number of people who are active on these solutions in a year, whatever that quotient is, as long as it's under $500, you're in pretty good shape, according to SHRM. I use the word churn a lot, not churn very often. So the idea is whatever your cost per engaged employees, if it's $500 or less per year, or it can be a little bit wonky when you're thinking about part-timers or contract employees, 2% of their annual salary. That is a really good benchmark to just make sure that things are online, because of course we know what the cost of a disengaged employee is on a negative side, and we know how much more engaged employees actually add value to the business. Now the next one is really around ongoing engagement trends. I can tell you when you're talking in rooms with executives, they love to see trends and they love to see benchmarks. So I always recommend this to our customers. And Lynn, I'm sure you've seen this as well. Start with some kind of a benchmark and just measure the changes in that benchmark over time. Now, the tip that we often say is, okay, if you're going to focus on something specific, like remember that case study we talked about reducing turnover, reducing onboarding time, focus on that specific metric, but overlay your data with key moments in your communications campaign. So if you want people to do a thing, then you're going to run a campaign against that, and then you're going to measure that trend over time.
I think it's important to point out there, executives love data. They want numbers. And so if we can speak their language, the more likely they'll stay engaged with the work that we're doing.
100%. And also just making sure that you're extending the time frame of that. Taking information at a moment in time can be somewhat useful, but trends are far more powerful.
Absolutely.
Now, this is one that I think people often overlook, which is the retention of messages. Now, we know the framework when it comes to internal communications. It's I want them to feel something, I want them to know something, I want them to do something. Well, retention of messages is really around the I want them to know something. But a great way is just using polling. So within your groups, poll them on awareness of a specific topic around a campaign. Do it before the campaign starts, maybe immediately right after, or maybe a week after that, just to really understand, are they actually retaining these messages? For those of you who are really nerdy about this stuff, like Lynn and I are, is the curve of forgetting, which some of you have probably seen. Essentially, it states that I think something like 97% of information is lost within 24 hours if it's not repeated. So repeating that information is not repetitive, it's reinforcement, but you can measure the retention of your messages through simple acts as polling your audience. All right, the final one, this is really more around the did they do the thing? This is your engagement follow-up effectiveness. Essentially, a lot of what we do in internal communications, especially around our frontline audience, is we want them to take a specific action. Did you enroll for this training course? Did you sign up for that management training program that you've been asking so much about? Were you able to participate in some kind of an action? But you can really understand, did your audience take that action compared to previous periods? And again, just like we talked about earlier with ongoing engagement trends, comparison over time are really effective. So that's the crux of the core. I know it sounded like a lot. Again, scan that if you want more detail about this, but it's a really useful rubric for measuring impact in terms of how it impacts the business. All right, Lynn, what do you think? So this is something we're kind of shifting gears a little bit into the really specific tactics around this, but I'm reminded of this Chinese proverb, which is the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today or now. Right. So I think it's a good segue into our next topic.
Yeah. So next, we want to talk about things that you can leave here today and start thinking about how can we work these practices into our normal routines, because we want you to build that case for why communication is important and the things that you can do to show the leadership team and the people you work with why communication is such a critical part of the business. So I've created what I call the Pulse Audit, and this is just simple practices that help you follow the path of your communications programs and identify what's working, what's not, and what you might need to change. And so the first one is review the numbers. We have so many different ways to measure things now, thanks to the platforms we're using and the tools that we have available to us. And so, dig into your analytics, decide what numbers are important to track from, quarter to quarter. Safety statistics can be a great way to identify issues with communications. And, we talked about that before. It's a big indicator that there is some sort of disconnect in the organization if your safety statistics are starting to go south. And it can tell you, what's being read and what's being ignored by reviewing those numbers. The next thing is ask your audiences. Again, we talked about that earlier. People like to be asked and they like to be listened to. And so you can conduct pulse surveys using your platform like Speap. You can hold listening sessions where you bring together a group of employees and just listen to what they have to say and hear what they're concerned about. When you're communicating with frontline employees, and so if you're doing something like a survey, make sure you're using QR codes and kiosks to make sure that the frontline employees are included in that, in those surveys. And then you can also attend stand-up meetings, go on site and participate in the stand-ups, and then ask questions, to help you identify are the right messages getting through to those audiences. And then we should stay connected with leadership. As communicators, we can't do our jobs effectively if we don't know what the leaders are thinking. And so, I recommend at least meeting with the senior leaders once a quarter and have a list of questions that you always ask. So you can kind of track what's the progress on the communications. Has this person's opinion changed on things? But you can ask them what's working well, what could be improved, what do they consider a successful communication, and it'll help you better understand how they're thinking and what they're looking for in the work that we're doing. I also encourage you to ask your leaders how they're empowering and training frontline supervisors to help them become better communicators. Often frontline supervisors were really good individual contributors. They excelled at their job. And so that's why they were promoted. They were given the opportunity to be managers. They aren't always promoted for their communication skills. And so we should be trying to help those folks because, like I said before, the frontline workers see the people they work directly with as the true leaders of the company. And so we need to make sure that supervisors and managers in those facilities and on the work sites are good communicators so they can help us make sure that the messages get through.
I love that. I think that's something that I'm going to come to in a minute as well, Lynn, but those frontline leaders are the face of the business, at least for their direct reports. And there's a lot of trust and relevance that they get. So I completely agree with you. If you can empower them to improve their communication skills, big impact on the front line.
All right. Field shadowing. We should not be sitting behind our desks, behind our computers all the time. Obviously we've got work to do, so we do need to do that, but we should also be out in the field, talking with people, shadowing different workers, riding in the trucks, because those are great opportunities to have just casual conversations with people to hear what's on their mind and what they need from the organization. I also encourage you, go out during the third shift. I know we all like our sleep, but there are people working overnight sometimes. And so if that's a part of your organization, you should understand how communication flows during those shifts. And because it's going to probably be different than how it flows during the day. And so it'll help you understand, what's working and what is missing.
Love that. That sounds like a lot of fun doing a third shift field shouting, but it's an important part of it.
It is. And then you can do a mini materials review. So every quarter, we'll start out by creating a list of criteria. Are the messages clear in the communications we're sending? Does it tie back to our culture? Does it, tie back to our vision, mission, and values? Things like that. So create a list of criteria, but then pull, say, 5 things that you sent out over the last quarter and compare them to that criteria that you have selected, to make sure that the messages that you're sending out are the messages you really want to be sending out. Sometimes, we get busy and there's a lot of things that we need to take care of. Sometimes we can miss the messages. And so taking the time to go back and look with a critical eye at the work we're doing helps make the work moving forward better. And then for the frontline, make sure that you're including digital signage, shift notes, and anything printed and posted in common areas to, just really make sure that those things are on target as well. And then this one isn't necessarily something you'd want to do quarterly, but once a year, it would be a good idea to map your content. Take a look at everything you produce. What are the channels you're using? And map it to your audiences. And that'll give you a very clear view of the work that you're doing and your team is doing. And you can identify what's redundant. And you can also find out, who are we missing? Or is there a group of employees that we're not communicating with because they don't have an email address or they never log into their email? And then you can also identify what no longer serves a purpose, because sometimes we do things that take a lot of time and effort, and it only reaches a very small group of people. And so also keep in mind languages. If you have employees who speak a different language than the language you're communicating in, and then also going back to that shift, are we reaching every shift that is operating in the company?
Yeah, the language is such an important point. I mean, you think about frontline workers, they are among the most diverse workforces in the country, even on the planet, frankly. And there's a multitude of languages that are being spoken. And if you're not meeting them in the language they are most comfortable speaking, then it's going to set you back a long ways. That's a really important point.
And the tools that we have available to us now, a lot of them offer easy translation. It may not be perfect, but it's better than, I think most of the time, it's better than not translating at all. Because again, thinking about safety, thinking about things that can be life and death, we want to make sure that we're reaching people in the language that they will best understand. And then weigh the cost. The last step is, compare the time and resources that's required to produce something against the impact that it's making. For example, if your team is spending 40 hours a week on a newsletter that you send out every Wednesday, and when you review the numbers and you see what employee groups it's reaching, and you realize that it's a very small percentage of your audiences, you might want to reconsider how you do that newsletter, or if you do that newsletter at all, and identify a way to better spend the time and resources that you have, and that will provide a bigger impact on the organization.
Yeah, I mean, we're always hearing that resources and teams are spread thin, so focus on the stuff that matters. I love that. Yes. This is great, and you have some more information about this, Lynn, that you can share with our groups after, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I have a handout with this, so hopefully you weren't, scribbling down quickly, but we'll provide you a PDF.
Love that. I love the concept of the pulse audit, especially if you're just kind of trying to get your hands around what's going on with this thing. Which take us to the next one around writer's block. This is a question that we get asked a lot, which is, okay, I've got something in place, but what do I say? And I think that's a tricky part when you're considering a frontline audience and you may not have had experience there. We've done a lot of investigation into this and given some examples about some of the tips about what your frontline teams are actually looking for that are going to engage us. So I wanted to share that now. You mentioned this point earlier, Lynn, about the frontline manager being the face of the business for their teams. The number one thing that makes an impact in our experience on how much the frontline teams are engaging with your content on your site, actually understanding the information, retaining information, participating in what you want them to do, is when they see posts from their local leaders. These are the people that they know and see regularly. They trust them hopefully, right? But these types of things really do drive trust and engagement because, okay, this isn't just something that's coming from the faceless corporate. This is coming from the manager that I see every day, the leader I see walking around the shop floor or around the hotel. Some examples of this are, post an update about a recent group achievement or a milestone. If you're in construction, maybe it's, hey, we've had 100 days without a safety incident, hopefully longer. Or, hey, we achieved this goal around our sales targets or our productivity targets in manufacturing, customer satisfaction score, our project was done ahead of schedule. Anything that you can do to recognize your team in the moment and also tag specific players and tie them to the business goals is really important. The next one is interesting because this is one where we get some questions on, which is localized context about a recent policy update that could be personal or relevant to the group. And I'll give an example that's really timely. We hear a lot of this around wellness, around mental health awareness, just overall wellness within an organization. And often these messages are trickled down from HR, from internal comms, overall kind of the faceless corporate, to put a kind of a negative connotation on it. But we also see that when a local leader can actually share their own experience about this and say, hey, just have some additional color about their own experience around this. Leaders can really help punch up, I think, the buy-in with these types of messages. And the pro tip on that, it's okay if people see similar posts from different authors. It's okay if something comes from corporate and a local leader says, hey, corporate's really talking about this Wellness initiatives. I think it's really important. And I just want you to know that my door's open if anybody has any questions or needs help. These are the types of things that actually do reinforce that. Let's not also forget that these are frontline teams. They're out there. They're busy. You only have a few minutes a day to capture their attention, but make it really, really tactical and relevant to their work that day, that week, or even just in the near term. Hey, we've got this big event that's coming up, or there's an update on how we're going to actually change the way we do a certain amount of work, or there's a scheduling update. Here's an updated productivity goal. Make it really relevant and specific to their goal, again, from that local leader. That's something that really does drive a lot of continuous engagement. Because what you don't want people to do is to log in once and then don't come back for 6 weeks. You want this to be part of their normal routine.
Yeah, and as communication pros, our job is to help make those posts possible from the leaders, provide support and training to the local leaders to tell them what we want them to do and give them the tools to help them create those posts, or even, provide them with some of those posts occasionally. But that's where we can work in tandem with those local leaders to create some really effective communications.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And, I do appreciate that some folks that are watching this might be rolling their eyes about, yes, there's no way our local manager is going to be adding this. But that third bullet about the localized context, that's where we recommend folks start with, because at least you have the template, as you pointed out, about, hey, here's the message, but just put your own little spin on it. We'll give you a little bit of guidance if you need it. But it's such an important point that, don't just leave them to the wolves.
And also teaching them how to use the AI tools to create some of those. That's a great way to kind of help them learn how to use, Copilot and the AI tools that are available, by giving them the framework, but then saying, here's how you can use Copilot to do this.
Yeah, so. 100%. Agreed. Right. Well, let's kind of move on, because here's another area that your content that we see this all the time. Big popular thing. Catch people in the act of doing something good. I've got to qualify that. But this is such an important thing when you're thinking about frontline teams. We've talked about safety a number of times. That's a really big part of construction and manufacturing, logistics, shipping, and things like that. But we see a lot of the most popular posts within Speak App are when people are catching people doing the right things. So, you might recognize and praise that frontline teams for doing something the right way. Hey, I want to recognize the such and such team and this individual. We had a spill at this plant, and thanks to their quick work, we're able to get it resolved without anybody getting hurt and a minimal downtime for our production, for example. Catching somebody in the act with a quick photo, that's such a great way to reinforce those types of behaviors. Plus, everybody likes a dopamine hit of getting tagged, and people want to be able to see, hey, I know this person, I can recognize them. That's a big one. Another thing we also say is showcase a creative way of solving a problem or delivering exceptional service. We see this in hospitality or in retail a lot, where somebody gets a praise from a customer or maybe a good G2 review or something. Share that information with your internal network. Again, drive some recognition and praise for those frontline teams for doing the right stuff. Again, I will say bonus points if you allow others in the group to share their own success stories, so they can comment on something like this if you've enabled that. I know there's some concern around this. What if they say something bad? Well, what if they say something really great, something really insightful? I think that's a really important part. And again, on the pro tips here, tie that recognition to events that impact their business. This really doesn't reinforce the why behind why people do the things they do and why we have certain policies in place. But catching people in the act of something good definitely drives a lot of engagement with your content.
And when you allow other people to comment, not just the leaders, the leaders are modeling the behavior we want by identifying, great things that are happening. And so hopefully that with that modeling behavior, your employees will follow the lead and not, post things that are inappropriate or that would be misunderstood.
Of course. Yep, I agree. I think another one that we hear a lot is promoting those underutilized or unknown benefits. Lynn, you brought up the point earlier about you probably have some kind of a training program or path to career advancement, but your frontline teams don't know about them. This is evident in polling data, but this is a great way to partner and form alliances with your HR teams because this is stuff that is important to them. It also brings you some additional support and visibility across the organization. But things that are really useful that we often see people posting about, these kind of underknown or underutilized things, career growth opportunities, make it in very simple, practical terms. Here's what we have and here's what you need to know. Even sharing a personal success story of an alumnus, we see this a lot. Oh, Lynn, you just completed your manager and training program, and today you finally taken the keys to the store as GM. This is a great way that, it's the lottery concept, right? Like, hey, it could happen to me, right? We see other things, financial literacy programs, wellness programs, discounts on goods and services. A lot of these things you probably have available to you through your payroll providers even, or through your HRIS, but you probably have a lot of interesting benefits that are available to people that they just don't know about. Promote them. You'd be surprised how much they like them.
And in my experience, the discounts page is always one of the most popular pages on any intranet.
Of course. Yeah. Who doesn't want a little discount? We'll love that. I think we're coming up here against time. So let's wrap it up with some of our key takeaways here, Lynn. I think number one, we've covered a lot of ground here today, but investing in your frontline engagement is always a positive ROI decision. When you consider how abundant and inexpensive these tools are and the significant impact that it has on the organization, it is always an ROI positive decision. We just have to articulate it in business terms.
And then frontline workers have valuable insights and they care more than they're given credit for. Lots of misperceptions. I've said it multiple times during this call, and we need to ask them what they want and give them opportunities to provide feedback.
Totally agree. And remember, when talking about money, if you're looking for a benchmark, if you keep your cost per engaged employee under $500 per year for your frontline, you are doing really, really well. That's not to say the cost of your tools are that much, but it's the cost of everything put together is going to be less than 500. That's a great benchmark.
And it's never been easier to do this. It's an exciting time to be in internal communications because we have technology and tools that are available and inexpensive. Frontline workers, leaders are starting to realize, oh, we need to communicate them, and they want to be engaged. And so it's a great opportunity to do some new things within your organization. There's a ton of data that exists to help you build that business case for increasing your investment in frontline communication. And frontline supervisors often they want to help. They know that they may not be the best communicators. And so they're looking for tools, they're looking for opportunities, and they're willing to be a part of the communication plan because they know that it'll make their team stronger.
Love that. I completely agree. And remember, there's no better time than now. You can start it. Do your pulse audit. Lynn can share you more information, or you can connect with our social. That's great. And leverage those local leaders and your existing programs for content people are actually going to read. You would be shocked. Just get started. You can get it done. I think we're just about wrapping up. So thank you to all of our attendees here today. We're going to move to Q&A here in just a minute. If anybody is interested to learn more about Speak App, how can it help your organization improve its communications and employee experience for frontline teams, please reach out to us. We have a platform that's available for mobile as well as desktop devices with all sorts of information that can help you track your ROI as well.
And if you're looking for help with internal or change communication, you can find me on LinkedIn, and we'll provide our links at the end here. But I work with companies to help them implement tools like Speak App, and also with major changes that are happening within the organization to help make sure employees understand what they're being asked to do and what they need to do.
Love that. All right. Well, we can move to Q&A, but again, remember we're doing that little giveaway. So if you want to connect with either Lynn or both of myself, please do. You can scan those QR codes to connect with on LinkedIn. We'd love to keep the conversation going. And remember to post about us. So I think we can move to Q&A. Let me check the questions to see if anything's coming through. But go ahead and post your questions if we've got them. Or you can throw them in the chat. Let me see if there's anything here. Oh, thank you, Shay. Shay mentioned that she thinks the benchmark number coupled with the cost of disengaged frontline employees makes the case. I agree, Shay.
I totally agree with that.
And thank you for the comment. And Allison, I got you. Yep, we're going to send you a copy of that core framework for sure. All right. I think we're running out of questions. We must have hit everything on.
We did such a good job.
Well, again, thank you, Lynn. I always love our conversations about this stuff. Preparing for this got me excited about it. I hope the audience found it useful as well. We'll definitely be sharing information with everybody after today's session. But thank you, Lynn. I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for inviting me to do this. It's a lot of fun to talk about.
Absolutely. I agree. And thank you to our audience. We'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.